Welcome to the 2016 Democratic U.S. Representative Primary Debate, sponsored by Wyoming PBS, Casper College, and the Casper Star-Tribune. We're here in Casper in the beautiful Wheeler Auditorium at Casper College. We want to thank voters from across Wyoming who participated in submitting topics and questions for today's debate. A three-person panel composed of representatives from each of the sponsoring entities reviewed and prioritized the questions, and they will be asked tonight. Our panel for today's debate is Craig Blumenshine, Public Affairs Director for Wyoming PBS, Dale Boren, Executive Editor of the Casper Star-Tribune, and Eric Franklin, Chairman of the Political Science Department of Casper College. Welcome, panelists.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is a classic debate with opening and closing statements. Each candidate will answer direct questions as well as respond or comment to the question asked the other candidate. The candidates have agreed to a pre-negotiated rules for the debate in which the moderator, that's me, has total discretion as to timing. So they've been instructed to behave themselves and stick to the time. And I settle all timing disputes. I hope there are none. We would ask that the audience refrain from applauding or heckling, or as I said earlier, throwing anything during the event so that we can focus on the candidates and best use the short time allotted for this important choice. And now it is my honor and pleasure to introduce to you the candidates running for Wyoming's lone seat in the U.S. House of Representatives, the Democratic candidates, and on stage for this debate. On your left is Charlie Hardy from Cheyenne. Mr. Hardy is a retired Catholic priest, substitute teacher, and social justice advocate. He is 77 years old. Welcome, Charlie.
Thank you.
Next to Charlie is Ryan Green. Ryan is the operations director at a family energy company serving oil, natural gas, coal, trona, and renewable energy industries. Ms. Green lives in Rock Springs and is 33 years old. Position on stage and order of opening statements and questions were determined by drawing names from a hat, not my hat, from a hat within the last 15 minutes prior to the debate. With the first opening statement is Charlie Hardy with 50 seconds, and second, Ryan Green for 50 seconds with appropriate rebuttal and response as required. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here we go. The first question goes to Ryan Green. No opening statement. I've already messed it up, and we haven't even gotten to the debate yesterday. The first opening statement is Charlie Hardy.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, and sorry to have to correct you, but I have 77 years of accumulated youth. You mentioned 77 years old. I still ran this morning, never been in the hospital, and so on. Thank everyone for being here. I was born and educated in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I have served parishes in Cheyenne, Laramie, Casper, Rock Springs. I was superintendent of schools for the Catholic schools in Wyoming, traveled the state at that time. And I've also served as a missionary in Latin America, and I lived in a cardboard shack for 8 years. But returning to Wyoming, I was surprised and shocked with what I saw. Women are not being treated equally. Families are being torn apart because parents have to work 2 and 3 jobs. Most people are just one illness away from bankruptcy. And politicians seem to care more about money than they seem to care about the people. And so this is not the America that I have known and not the America that I love. And I would like to fight to see those things changed. I would like to see universal health care. I'd like to see women's rights respected. I would like to see getting money out of politics.
Your time is up.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
You've got to watch that light now. And the second opening statement, Ryan Green.
Yeah, well, thank you, and thanks everyone for being here this afternoon. I'm Ryan Green, and I grew up in a modular home in Rock Springs. but my family had an idea, and we worked hard to make it a reality. We built an energy service company, and we created hundreds of jobs for Wyoming. And I've worked them all, from a roustabout to operations director. And when this last bust hit, I was forced to let some good folks go. Now, federal policies can either help or hurt us, and who we send to Congress matters. You know, people say that Wyoming has a lone voice in the U.S. House, but Wyoming doesn't need a talker. Wyoming needs a worker to put in the long hours, bring our tax dollars home, and create new opportunities for Wyoming. Thank you.
Thank you. The first question goes to Ryan Green.
Mr. Green, you just spoke of your potential being in Washington, and current Gallup data suggests that Americans have more confidence in the presidency, banks, organized labor, newspapers, and big business than in Congress. What in your history here in Wyoming tells us that you can make a difference in Americans and Wyomingites' confidence in Congress?
Yeah, well, it's important that we understand that this is a freshman Congress position. So, you know, the big promises that candidates make are, that's exactly what they are, as big promise. We have to have practical, realistic solutions. And I believe that starts with working together, working with Democrats, Republicans, and independents alike. We've lost our ability in Congress to communicate. We've lost our ability to have dialogue. And so we can't advance ideas. We can't advance policy if we're not willing to hear different ideas and hear each other out. So I would advocate for that. You know, in the oil field, we work together every day. We work with Democrats, independents, libertarians, all alike, and we find common ground to get solutions, and I would do that in Congress.
Mr. Hardy, would you like to respond?
One of the most important classes I ever had was debate in high school, where we had to see two sides and we had to be ready to debate either side of a question. You eventually end up with a favorite one, but you had to see there were two sides to every question. My whole life, I have tried to work with other people, whether in parish situations, other situations, you have conflict. You deal with people, you try to make friends, and I think that's possible in Congress today.
Response?
You know, it's Congress is broken. You know, it's got a single-digit approval rating, and Americans are fed up with the way and the grandstanding that goes on there. And you know, the typical qualifications and the typical politics that we know these days just aren't cutting it. So I think we need somebody that's willing to roll up their sleeves and go to work for the people, not the party. We send people out there that are more interested in driving a point than they are making progress.
The next question goes to Charlie Hardy.
Mr. Hardy, some people feel that federal land should be returned to the state to facilitate development access or sold to support state spending. Others think that that move would limit hunting, fishing, and recreation access. What are your views on this issue?
Yes, I believe public land should stay in public hands. Talking to a policeman in Cheyenne, he was mentioning he was from Texas. He would have to pay $2,000 to go hunting anywhere down there. I do not see the state being capable of managing the lands that are presently in the hands of the federal government, and I'm also afraid of those lands becoming private lands.
Response?
This is one of my top two campaign issues. Public lands should stay in public hands, and I will fight the state takeover in Congress. You know, we just went through a $680 million budget shortfall in the state of Wyoming, and if those lands are transferred to the state, we are liable for the cost. We're liable for things to staff and maintain them, unpredictable costs like wildfires. So, you know, we don't have the money to maintain these lands, and if we can't afford them, then we sell them. We sell them off to private developers and to, you know, we flip our private homes we flip our hunting grounds for private homes. So I would fight the state takeover of public lands. Public lands need to stay in public hands.
Follow up?
I think we're both in agreement on this topic.
Thank you. The next question goes to Ryan Green.
Mr. Green, in light of recent events, what should Congress do to improve the relationship between citizens and law enforcement?
Yeah, well, I think it starts with, we've got to stop demonizing our law enforcement. I read an article the other day that 99% of all incidents and interaction with law enforcement ends up without any harm, any type of incident occurring. So we got to stop demonizing. These are our friends. These are our neighbors. And the police, I believe, do a fantastic job. There is a movement out there that demonizes the police as bad individuals. But I think it's community involvement, and it's a education awareness between our citizens and the police. And I think they do a fantastic job, but I think it's just a little bit more education of what these folks provide us and how they do their jobs.
Rebuttal?
I liked what the Cheyenne Police Department had on their cars: to protect and to serve and protect. And I see that as the role of the police. I'm concerned about the militarization of our police forces. And I think that is something which does not help with community relations. And I think it's a question that's going to have to be addressed.
Follow up?
Well, I stand with our police men and women. They do a fantastic job. They keep us safe here at home. And I think they deserve the credit for wearing the uniform, putting it on every day, and putting their lives at risk.
Charlie, you get the next question.
Mr. Hardy, does your reading of the Second Amendment allow, in your view, Wyomingites access to any weapon they so desire? And if there are limitations, in your view, what are they?
I agree. First of all, I support the Second Amendment. Secondly, I also agree with the Supreme Court, where it says certain reasonable restrictions are possible under the Constitution. I'm a substitute teacher, junior high and high school level. That's one area I would not like to walk into school and feel that I have to hold my hands up in the air throughout the class day. So I agree with the Supreme Court. There are certain reasonable restrictions that can be placed, but that does not mean that I am not supporting the Second Amendment. I don't think anyone is about to take away guns from people in Wyoming. They're important: farmers, ranchers, and people for their individual protection. But reasonable restrictions can be imposed.
Response?
This is Wyoming. Of course we support the Second Amendment, and it's about responsible gun ownership. My dad taught me to shoot, and now I'm teaching my kids to shoot. But I do think there are some common sense things that we can do. I support the no-fly, no-buy policy. I think it's if you're on the FBI's terrorist watch list, then we shouldn't make it easier for you to have a gun. And so I do support that. But it's a responsible gun ownership, and we do a pretty good job here in Wyoming with that.
Response?
Sounds good. Let's move to the next question.
The next question goes to Ryan Green.
Mr. Green, will you work to preserve or eliminate funding for Planned Parenthood? And what impact will your policies have on women in Wyoming?
Yeah, look, I would definitely work to continue to fund Planned Parenthood services. These services reach far beyond, abortions and things like that. They save many lives with cancer screenings, prenatal services, and adoption referrals. So I would support legislation to keep funding for that.
Response?
Seconding that, I would also like to say that it is a very difficult decision for a woman to make to have an abortion. I'm not in favor of abortions. I don't think anyone is. But I think it's time for men to begin to shut up on this question and stop telling women what they should do and start talking to men about male responsibility.
Follow up?
No.
Next question goes to Charlie Hardy.
Mr. Hardy, global trade is an issue in Wyoming and across the nation. In your opinion, how should the United States position itself on global trade issues? And what is the role of the U.S. House to address global trade concerns?
I think a good part of global trading has hurt workers in the United States and has also hurt people in other parts of the world. I was in Mexico, across the border, walking through a garbage dump with people and asked them, why aren't you working in one of these U.S. factories? And they said, in spite of the putrid air here, we can make more money here than we can in one of those factories. I think we are doing a disservice many times in this whole thing. It is upsetting. Gandhi once asked the people of India to burn all their clothes that were not made in India. If we were to ask the people of Wyoming to do that day, we would have a nudist colony throughout the whole state. I think it's time to bring many of those jobs back to the United States.
Response, Ryan?
I support any trade deal that would open up new markets for Wyoming products, but I don't support the TPP in its current form. I like the idea that standards have to be raised to American standards in order to do trade with us, rather than us lowering our standards to compete on a global market. But we have to verify and ensure that we're not losing jobs, and there's no language in the current trade deals that says that. We need to have that language before I'd support that.
I will second that, and I grew up in Levi's, and I mean, since I was a little kid, you go and buy a pair, $50, made in Mexico, made in Haiti, made in Egypt. For $50, those could also be manufactured here in Wyoming. And there are a lot of things like that that could provide jobs here in Wyoming instead of being outsourced around the world.
The next question goes to Ryan Green.
Green, what should the federal minimum wage be? And if you argue that it's a state's issue, should the federal minimum wage be abolished?
No, this is an issue we need to address. The federal minimum wage has not been increased since 2009. And so we definitely need to raise the minimum wage. But when we think about minimum wage, we think about entry-level jobs. But that's not always the case, especially in Wyoming's economy. We have workers leaving the field that used to make $25 and $30 an hour trying to support a family on these entry-level jobs. And so we definitely need to take a look at raising the minimum wage. But I think our mission should be that we help the workers, but we don't cripple small businesses or double their payroll. And so I think we start the conversation at $10 an hour.
The front page of the Wyoming Eagle Tribune had an article that in Cheyenne, a single parent with a preschool and school child needed $18 an hour to just take care of basic needs. I'm for starting at $15 an hour. If we would do that, especially with big businesses, that doesn't necessarily have to apply to small businesses, but if we were to do it, people working for Walmart would be able to buy products from the small businesses in Cheyenne instead of having to buy them from Walmart, for example.
Yeah, and I'm not real sure where Mr. Hardy's at on this. He told the Democratic State Convention that everybody needed $15 an hour right now, but he told the Wyoming Tribune Eagle that it wasn't for every employer. Not everybody's Walmart. We have small businesses that this would double their payroll, and potentially we would lose workers in the workforce. So we've got, again, I think we need to start the conversation at $10 an hour.
Next question goes to Charlie Hardy.
Mr. Hardy, does the U.S. House have a role in retraining displaced coal miners? If not, why? And if so, what is that role?
I find myself sizzling a bit about this because I really think the large fossil fuel companies had a responsibility of preparing if they were really concerned about their workers. The big executives could see what was happening, what was coming, and to suddenly one day put 500 people out of work, that was not fair. I look back to the 1800s when Carnegie did the same thing with steel workers. Union contract was coming up, and suddenly 800 people were laid off, 3,000 people. They had stockpiled steel so they could do it. We have an oversupply of coal. I just see a repetition of this. Forgive me for not saying what the U.S. House of Representatives should do about that. They probably should do something about these fossil fuel industries, which have hurt workers repeatedly throughout the United States, and then told people it's the blame of the government.
I think they should provide some assistance to these laid-off coal miners. We did this back in the 70s with the uranium mines. I worked with a welder that was laid off in Jeffrey City, and they provided these retraining services. And so they provided, you could go to a trade school and you could learn a new trade. He learned welding, but they provided welding and electrical work and things like that. And he worked the next 25 years in Wyoming's economy as a welder. So I think they should provide that assistance to these laid-off miners.
And I agree they should provide it, but it's because the coal companies did not accept the responsibility which they should have in providing that service.
Governor, may I ask, are you saying that the companies should provide this, or is that something that you, I mean, I was asking about the role of the U.S. House of Representatives.
Did you say governor?
I was asking for...
He's asking for my permission first, which I always adopt, and think that's a good idea. Yes, you may. No,
Okay.
but you direct the question to whom you're asking.
Ryan, Mr. Green, do you think that the companies ought to provide that service? Or I was asking about the role of the U.S. House of Representatives.
Yeah, I think the federal government could provide that assistance, yes. They did it back in the 70s. I think it was the Jobs Retraining Act of the late 70s where they've done this program before. And so I think they have a role, and we could take a look at adopting that same policy for these laid-off coal miners.
Now, given that time, Charlie Hardy, if you have any follow-up, you can.
I have no problem with that, but I really think the coal companies have shirked their responsibility in this regard. As a result, the federal government has to intervene sometimes, but they should not have had to.
The next question goes to Ryan Green.
Mr. Green, Wyoming is making cuts to its budget because of the economy. What cuts would you pursue at the federal level to trim federal governmental expenditures?
Well, look, I run a small business, and we have to make tough decisions. And so we've got to take a look at where we can cut money and, where we're spending money. Congress gave the Pentagon $3 billion more than it asked for. And, that's a lot of services that we can take a look at allocating that money for. But I think there is some room to cut different programs, especially, some of the outdated ones, the regulations and stuff. I would suggest a committee to review regulations that are outdated that we spend thousands and thousands of dollars on. But one of the main things that we can cut is, these symbolic votes. We vote 62 times on the Affordable Care Act, and according to the congressional research, it's about $1.5 million per vote.
Time up. Thank you.
Ready? The whole question of the federal budget is something that's in deficit, is something that has to be addressed. And the only way it's going to be addressed is by partisan effort. The Simpson-Bowles study, for example, I think that was a step in the right direction. I wouldn't agree with everything in it, but that's the only way. To ask me specifically, that's pretty difficult. But I think we have to have bipartisan effort in this regard, and it's got to be done soon.
Follow up, Ryan.
And what some of the biggest cuts that we can make is take a look at these tax expenditures that we give corporations and billionaires. They add up to $1.2 trillion to our debt every year with no way to offset that cost. So on day one, we add $1.2 trillion. If we're going to address the budget, we need to take a look at how we're adding to that every year.
The next question, panelists, go to Charlie Hardy.
Governor, I see that we have time for just one more question, and then our floor crew says it'll be time for closing statements.
Oh, I was
Goes by
hoping there'd
when
be
you're having
more.
fun, doesn't
It does. Mr. Hardy, we have one more question. And this is from a Facebook viewer that I want to read a direct quote of his question so that I get it correct. And he's talking about your vision of revenue options and possibilities for Wyoming. He says, and his name is Mark Hawkins, we'll all suffer from the coal and oil downturn, but his reality is that they're gone for good. What's next, and what are you going to do to make it happen? And if you're telling him that coal is going to make a big comeback, please don't waste his time.
All right, right. And I would not be in favor of saying shut down coal mines today. There's got to be a transition. But honestly, as we look toward the future, we're going to rely more and more on other sources of energy. And so we've got to bring other businesses back to Wyoming. Does that address his concern there?
Potential revenue streams for the state of Wyoming, I believe, and what you might do to facilitate.
Again, there are many industries that we've got to develop here. We talk about tech industries, but I also talk about things like, as I mentioned, about the Levi's. We used to have a call center in Cheyenne. Now when I call, I talk to people in the Philippines. I was over in Manila. They're building another ones.
And I'm going to call you. I gave you some extra time for the last question, but your time is up. Ryan,
Same question?
Response?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot of things that we can do. I believe we need to diversify the economy both inside and outside of the energy industry. And what that means inside the energy industry is, you know, Wyoming, we have it all. We have coal, we have wind, we have solar, we have natural gas. And if the market's buying those products, we need to be selling them whatever they're buying. The other thing that we need to do, and our congressman needs to support all of Wyoming's energy producers. The other thing we need to do is look at bringing in additional companies to Wyoming, but that starts with infrastructure.
Thank you very much. Follow-up?
Fine.
That ends the questions? The direct questions, thank you very much for sticking to the subjects as well. I didn't have to jump in there and say you're not answering the question. Maybe there was one. You now are poised for closing statements. Ryan Green, you have the first shot at a closing statement.
Great. Wyoming will elect Democrats, but not just any Democrat, ones with Wyoming values. We've got a great example here today, Governor Mike Sullivan. Wyoming put him into office twice. Same with Governor Freudenthal. They successfully balanced energy development with conservation, and their views didn't fall neatly into either party. But Wyoming's values seldom do. We want Medicaid expansion. We want gun rights. We want to keep public lands in public hands, and we want to sell coal. Now, these aren't party issues. They're Wyoming issues. They're not too far right and they're not too far left. They're somewhere in the middle, even when Liz Cheney is as far right as they come. But let's be honest, she's got things wrapped up on the Republican side, and one of us will face her in the general. And unless her challenger supports Wyoming's coal and natural gas industries, well, then she's got this seat locked up. And I want to thank everybody for being here today. Thanks to our sponsors and our moderators for making this possible. Thanks to my kids for being quiet. I'll take you for ice cream, I promised. Thanks to my wife for not leaving me in this process. And thanks to all of my volunteers all across the state. Thanks to Charlie and all of his folks for being here. Thank you guys for letting us debate, and have a wonderful evening.
Charlie Hardy, your closing statement.
When I decided to run for Congress, some people told me not to. They said I didn't have enough money to hire a staff, and I said I wanted to do it this time with just volunteers. They said one person can't make a difference. I don't believe that. And they said that I have to compromise my beliefs, and I've never done that. What I've tried to do all my life has been to serve the people throughout Wyoming and throughout the world. I think Ryan Green is a good person. I wish him well. But he does not have the experience that I've had over the course of years. And I really feel experience in one industry, in one part of the state, doesn't prepare a person to represent the whole state of Wyoming. I've traveled the state of Wyoming, but I've also seen a lot of tears and heard a lot of cries of people. Too many politicians are only looking into their pocketbooks and looking and listening to those who have a lot of money to give them for their campaign. We need to get money out of politics. Women need to be treated equally. We have to diversify our economy. We have to make sure that workers are getting just wages. And healthcare and education should not be seen as luxuries. Our country will be better if people are healthy and well educated. And so we can achieve these goals, I believe. We plan to fight for universal health care. We plan to fight for women. We plan to diversify our economy. We plan to fight so that everyone can go to college. Our campaign motto is run with Charlie, and so we're asking people to run with us. We can make a difference. We will make a difference.
Thank you very much, candidates. You've done a nice job this afternoon. To the audience, thank you for attending. To those of you attending by television, we appreciate your coming, and we hope that this debate will be helpful to you in deciding your choice for this very important position. Finally, I join Wyoming PBS, Casper College, and the Casper Star-Tribune in thanking these candidates and these panelists, the candidates for running for public office, to start with, not an easy decision to make, and for participating in the 2016 Democratic U.S. Representative primary debate. Good night. and thank you all very much.
Ryan, you have a great future, and we have a great future.
Very enjoyable. Very enjoyable.